that is a little bit like controversial or spicy, not to the name, I would like to cover that topic on the live stream. The problem I see with a lot of content out there as it pertains to crypto is that it really is like a regurgitation of existing opinions, and people are like kind of afraid to, I think, step on toes, and would never want to do anything like inflammatory or unfair. But I think if there are like hard questions that need to be answered by the space, those are the types of answers we'd be seeking on the live stream. That's my perspective, but curious to hear anyone else.
Go there. You're muted though.
Oh yeah, I know. I just like not to like derail what you're saying. I like that. I think it's great, and but I'm also thinking like something that's kind of at least like for setting a framework, like as a basis. Like I really like Hot Ones because they do the same interesting like bit every time, where it's like they grab something. Yeah, it's perfect. They grab something for the Instagram and they're like, "Tell me about this photo," and you're like, "Oh shit, we're gonna go on a story right now, right? Let's hear about this." So I like the idea, like grabbing. So the people that you interview, grab something from their Twitter. Boom, tell me about this tweet, right? And then you're like, I want you to break this down for me. What were you thinking? Where you at? Like, what's your opinion? Yeah. So it's like you can kind of copy that and grab a neuron tweet and say like, all right, cool, like talk to me about this. So yeah, that's like something as like a good framework, because having those little things that people are like, oh yeah, I love it when they do that thing, right? Sure. Some of them will work, some of them might not work, but you can have some like a bag of tricks basically that you can kind of dig into and use. And then there's also like maybe you have, and this is like a Tim Ferriss thing I'm thinking of, like a series of questions that are like in your back pocket that you don't always ask every time, but when you're like you feel the conversation lagging or something, you can like bring those up and say, cool, these are usually interesting points of discussion for people to go off on. Something else I was trying to do when I was doing interviews for Meta Game was like to get people to talk less about the technicalities of what we're all doing here, and to talk more about like their motivations, their values, their like interests, the stories behind what brought them in. So like trying to steer the conversation in that way, not get caught up into like, tell me about yield farming and like the price of, chain link oracles or whatnot. Like, cause that's great, but that's all the content we have right now.
That's very true.
Is it going to be interviews mostly like on the Friday show, or is the idea that it's you two guys kind of going over like the topics of the day and then kind of taking stuff in from the outside?
I think that, well, in the beginning, like days of the spicy take, I am like very flexible to try a variety of things. But I think what I like best, at least when I watch like, other podcasts, is when there's like one or two hosts and they have like, their like bag of tricks, as Yoler was saying, and when they have like a new guest come on every time. Because then it's something to look at week after week. Yeah. But Haman, like you're also a host, so would love to hear your take as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think like so with the interview thing, like I feel like that's like done a lot too in this space. Like I kind of want to try something new and more unique. Yeah. Like I do think MetaMedia in general we can do there's like work we can do in terms of like aggregating all the existing content, like either all those metagame interviews we did, right? That's like perfect stuff for MetaMedia, right? That should be like Pete had that mock-up, we can put that there. In terms of our actual show, like I feel like it would be, at least in these like starting phases, better for us to focus specifically on stuff going on in Meta Cartel rather than just the wider crypto space, because like the wider crypto space has like there's enough like attention on that stuff already, I feel like, versus like there's no one's going to talk about us if we're not talking about us, right? So if like I think like even just like, for example, like the Shots Fired newsletter, right? Like if we literally just went through that on the live stream and kind of just like talked about stuff that we're doing, things that are going on in our Meta Cartel world internally and stuff, I feel like that might be more like a better like niche for us to target at first. And yeah,
I mean, you're capitalizing on a captive audience, but you're also like limiting yourself to a very niche market of content, right? Like, if you're like, hey, metagame did that, some people are like, what the fuck? Like, what does that mean? Like, I think you could be not following very fast, right? If you're like going down the Shots Fired newsletter. Although it would be fascinating to us, it's kind of like, is it wide enough to give people a chance to like to be entertained?
Yeah, I think like it's not necessarily the whole show has to be about that, but maybe we spend 10, 15 minutes just like going through the news and adding our takes on it. And I think too, like I like this idea that you had of like having these like little like repeatable like things that we can do to kind of engage the audience. And I feel like I want to do that too, but like not so much like I want it to be more like interactive with the audience rather than like focusing more on the audience, right? Because like any of this stuff, like basically I want the criteria to be like, would this make sense to do like not as a live stream? If it does, then we probably shouldn't do it. Like I want stuff that's specifically for a live stream, which is like interacting with viewers and actually engaging with viewers. So like another thing I was thinking of is actually like having only like, instead of like multiple hosts coming on and talking to each other on the podcast, have like multiple people who can host it, but have only one host, and the host is like just kind of going through stuff and having a conversation with the audience and the audience only.
Like crypto news, like Omar Bond's show, kind of.
I haven't watched it, but I imagine like I kind of
like
get what you would do.
Yeah, crypto news. That's his thing. He's like, this is what happened, and then he brings guests on every now and then, but not every time. Mostly it's like a Twitch thing too, where he's like, oh cool, these people are doing this stuff right now.
Yeah, like one live stream I watched that I really enjoy that they kind of do this at is like the Lot 2046 live stream. It's, I can send you guys links to it later, but essentially they have like a bunch of people on the Lot team. They call it like a live stream rather than a live stream, and it's just people kind of like going on and chatting with the audience about like what they're doing, and like just it's not really scripted at all. It's just kind of like off the cuff random conversations, like just literally like people just like talking, right? And it's really like engaging, where he directly like calls people out in the thing, like they send them links and stuff, then like they go and like look stuff, comment on it, like talk about stuff. So like the actual like content aggregation, like coming up with a schedule, like what are we going to talk about, everything is like actually done in the live stream, right? Like they just turn on the camera and start talking, and even if it's like, even after at times just like sitting there quietly for a couple minutes, right, just like reading comments and stuff, like I think that's fine. It's a lot better to just be more chill than have to like be like like actually like a live TV show or like a TV station where they're like cutting back and forth and like you always got to be live and we always got to be like this and that. If that makes sense. And in that sense, that can be kind of like like I wanted to like start streaming on the MetaMedia channel just when I'm working on random stuff, whether or not people whether I'm not saying anything, I'm just kind of like sharing my screen, commenting, like saying random stuff, whether people are watching or not, just kind of hanging out. I think that's what I feel like that's the kind of stuff that would be interesting. And then we, on top of that, we can have like a more regular like show style setup like we had this Friday.
I think like the scale kind of matters and where you are in the funnel for trying to get people in. So I think like kind of you talking about just streaming stuff that you're doing, that gives people are going to be interested to watch that if they know you from other stuff and like hear you doing other things, but then they can watch that and get more to know you better and more endeared to you, and then want to weigh in, like listen in or contribute whenever like you're going to be on any of the other shows or whatever. But I think it's kind of hard to like bootstrap really, as far as like getting people. So I think engaging and taking a lot of live feedback is good, but not everyone's available when the show's on. So it'd be good to have something that is also like, good to consume as a podcast or on your own time. I just think I think being open ended is good. Having maybe the feedback kind of come in, and you can riff. Whoever's running the show that day can kind of riff on it. But then whether necessary or not, having like bits almost like you talk about like what are you going to talk about for the spicy things of the week. You can put that out in a tweet Wednesday or Thursday, like a couple things, get votes, and be like, okay, well we'll talk about at least the first one, like have that be the spicy take of the week bit, and then you have a couple little things, but then have it be free form where a lot of it you're kind of taking the feedback from the audience, and maybe you don't get to everything.
Yeah.
And I really like from what the Gitcoin live stream does is that there's a good chunk of the show that's really Slido based. It's basically like at the start of each live stream, they send out a Slido link, and it's like any questions that you want to ask the people who are on, whether it's the Gitcoin team, the other community members that are there, because Vitalik shows up sometimes, etc. Like there's a Slido, you ask questions and you vote on the questions. And then after they get through the presentation content at the beginning, they get to the Slido questions and they go through the questions in the order that they're voted, but they also bring on the person who asked the question. So they don't ask other people's questions. They just say, okay, it's this person's question. They give them video and voice, or I guess they unmute them and allow them to talk. And that's basically their show. And I feel like that's what makes it something that I like attending, because if there's a conversation going on and I think there's something interesting to put in there, I can ask a question on Slido, or I can even participate in the discussion that's going on as people just converse about the question. So I like that. I don't know if that's necessarily what we want to do here, but it's one option.
Yeah, I like the idea of sort of crowdsourcing our content, and like, because the audience interaction can go beyond just when the live stream's happening. If we have on our Twitter account like prompts for the community to sort of like send us what they want us to talk about, or send us questions, or vote on even if it's like a Twitter poll, right? Like, and people can do it async. Like, I think that's also a cool way to engage the audience.
I think it's if you vote on something in the week and you see that it wins or whatever, like you might be like, I can't attend the live stream, but I'll listen to it, on Saturday and like hear what their take was on the thing.
Yeah, I like that idea that it's like if it's something that's interesting to you on Twitter and then like they talk about it, you can, you can listen to it later and it'll still be relevant instead of like having to be there for it to be relevant. One more thing I brought up in the document was Darren Mills has been developing this concept of like minting a tweet as like a signed NFT. So like you could create like this spiciest tweet award and then like mint an NFT for it like live. So that could be another cool thing.
Tweet.
Yeah,
NFT,
exactly.
I like that.
NF tweet.
As long as gas prices are under 100, we'll
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely crazy. Cool. So any other comments or suggestions from you all based on last week's live stream? One thing I would love to talk about as well is how that feedback translates to what we might do differently this time around. So I love the idea of engaging the audience, and I haven't been like a part of a lot of live streams, but I have attended like virtual crypto conferences, especially in this day and age. And something that I love about like live AMAs is that, there's that excitement of like, oh, there actually is not really a structure. And, we're getting like live feedback from the audience, and, and you're just like, oh, I'm like on the edge of my seat. Like, what's going to happen next? I'm very like engaged with the conversation right now. So I don't know if, I don't know that like a full AMA with the audience is like the right format for the spicy take, but what do you guys think in terms of how, like, just like what a loose like framework might look like for an hour-long live stream?
I think you'd start like we wanted to have one or two bits, like the spiciest topic or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
I like that. I really like that idea.
You want to like get some of the pre-show engagement from like Twitter.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, maybe that feeds who, like maybe people want to talk about like the Yearn Wi-Fi madness or whatever. Like get someone on who maybe they can drive through. Maybe someone pops on just for a little bit. Like, I'm familiar with how all that stuff works. I do a lot of I work in DeFi, as I know all of us kind of do.
Sure.
Whatever. Like, you could have someone come on and talk through that stuff during part of it. Doesn't have to be a full interview or whatever. And then if there's one or two other bits, and then Yaylor or Yalor? Yaylor. Not a hard or.
Yay, a hard yay.
Yay. But that could even be just how you kick off, and then people can drop stuff in the in the chat. You compile some of that, and then crank through and see how it goes. I don't know, with maybe we scale up tech wise to the point where we can like bring people on from the community. But if you get that, I think that idea is kind of cool. If you just kind of like,
that'd be interesting. Like if someone's watching on Twitter, you can just like bring them in. Like, all right, you're interesting. Like bring you into the chat. Like here's a link. Like in your DMs.
Or you need like not many people watching, so it doesn't matter that much. But like you need the capability to like have them come in, have it not be a complete disaster, and then like kick them out if they just come on and start yelling at you or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's some things we can use to do stuff like that, where we can just send them a link and it'll just pop up their camera and mic and it'll show up on our stream. And like we need to like do some like test streams first to like make sure we have our shit together before we like for next time, unlike last time.
I mean, I feel like the first 3 shows are going to be like experimenting. I mean, maybe for the first like whole season, right? It'll be experimenting, like seeing what works and stuff. Yeah. So if the first 3 shows are like bagged because of audio or technical issues, then it just helps us make it that much better.
Yeah. That show was on Covan.
Yeah, it was. That's why I called it episode 0 for a reason. Yeah, I knew it wasn't going to go well.
Other like easy places for content is you could do like Meta Cartel member of the week to come and talk through like the Meta Cartel stuff of the week if you want. Like, if you're looking to bring more people in, like I'm just thinking like easy layup things. Like if you want to go through the Meta Cartel, like what's going on, like go a little deeper into like one thing that someone could like talk about Raid Guild, like what the hell's Raid Guild. Yeah, that's an easy 15-20 minutes or as long as you want.
Mm-hmm. Or you could like bring Peter on to talk about the thing he hates the most for this week. Yeah. Maybe once a month you have Peter on. He's like, fuck this and fuck that.
It grinds my gears, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Grinds my gears, yeah.
We can like Peter's pet peeves.
Ooh, that's great. Yeah.
Alliteration. I like it.
Triple P.
One thing for like, I really like the look of the video. Like it looked like nothing else I've ever seen, and it was awesome. So like to me, there are 2 paths forward. One is to be like higher tech and find ways to bring other people on into that. Another option is to go lower tech. Like I don't necessarily want to lose how awesome it looked, but like to me, the bare minimum for what you need to do for this is literally just stream a Zoom call and you'd be able to bring people on, etc. I'm not saying you should do that, but it's just an option. You could go lower tech or you could go higher tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hamad, I actually had a quick question. Is it can we both be on a Zoom call this week and have that go through OBS and then be broadcast?
Yeah, what we can do, like basically how that would work is like we can set up a Zoom call and I can just like paste the Zoom call into the thing. So like it won't be actual like individual video feeds. It'll just be like a grid of people like we have in Zoom, and then we can just have the rest of the stuff around it. But yeah, I think like we can do that, like because the like Skype had the feature that let you get the individual video feeds, but it seemed to be in beta still, clearly. So in that sense, we can switch to using Zoom for that. And in terms of like bringing other people on, I really want to bring like people who aren't like super involved in the community on, like just random people like who are like we answer like crypto noobs questions, right? Or like I
was thinking like the normie like, hour or something.
We
just answer like random questions of people who might also be interesting.
I don't know if you guys listen to the Bitcoin podcast. It was like many years ago or whatever. I think they like called like an Arby's and like asked them if they took Bitcoin. Tried to explain to them what Bitcoin was. Don't do that.
drive-through?
I don't know who they got a hold of, but
I was gonna say I didn't even know you could call a fast food restaurant. I thought it would just go right to headquarters. I always do it at the farmers market. I'm like, do you take any coins, any ERC20 coins? And they're like, we take like quarters and stuff. No, like, yeah.
No, I really like that. And that is like spicy content, right? Like I brought this up on the live stream, but I was talking with my younger brother about like this whole concept of DAOs and just Web3 in general. And he's like 18 years old and he's very into like trading like stocks and stuff like that. But I think for him, like DeFi, in a lot of ways, I think if you're not in the community, talking about like what is money and like why do we need decentralized finance and all this stuff, it feels very conspiratorial, I think, to people who are fine like with our current banking system, right? They're like, what is this like libertarian bullshit? But I kind of like it, I like that give and take. And I do think that if you're not able to elucidate your idea to the point where at least someone understands what it is and where you're coming from, then you don't really understand the space, right? You're just like, again, regurgitating like what cool one-liners about like banking the unbanked and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think like a good sort of benchmark to keep for ourselves is like, can someone who's not deep into crypto Twitter watch our live stream and enjoy it? And if that answer is no, then we're doing something wrong. Because I think the cool part about like, because it's always a balance, right? We have our existing sort of audience and like user base, which is us and ourselves and the people around us, and like they want to see a certain kind of content, and then there's like the people who are outside of this space, right? And that kind of content is kind of different. It's on a different level. It's probably a bit more introductory and it might not be as interesting as to people who are inside of it, but when the way you can bridge those two together is like by doing stuff like bringing on noobs and like getting them to ask questions about what we're doing, so that the people inside crypto can get informed onto like what people outside think and how they're like feeling, and then also we can educate the people outside on what's really going on inside, like bridging that gap.
Totally.
Like this initial thing, and I think it being fun and entertaining as possible makes sense because it's kind of experimental. And if you are trying to start like more of a media thing, it's like like the proving ground for like different ideas or formats or people. Even like if you start talking a lot about one type of topic, maybe that's like a different show, or maybe there's like people that want to start doing interviews, but that come on here regularly, and then people say, "Oh, I like that person. I'll listen to them interview whoever." Or you want to have a more regular thing on a specific topic, stuff like that, and then like Mod's saying with just streaming your own stuff. Like this is how you can start to build, get people familiar with you a little bit, and then maybe they follow you on Twitter and they follow your other stuff and join in and subscribe to your newsletter or whatever, whether it's associated with this or not.
Yeah,
like I kind of like that idea, and like if some stuff doesn't work, like go over, you just try it and move on.
I feel like I've seen a really common theme among a lot of like projects that sort of are able to build a really strong community following. Like Crypto Voxels for me is a great example, right? Like you look at Crypto Voxels and how strong their community is and how passionate and positive everything is there with like the crypto art community and everything. And then you look at something like Decentraland, right, where they raise like tens of millions of dollars and like all this sort of stuff, but they don't really have a community. They're kind of out of touch with the community, all this sort of stuff. And the way Crypto Voxels was able to build their community following was that they were just building in the open, right? Like everything they were doing, like they kind of shared it as they were doing it. They built it with the community, right? It was really interesting to see like the growth of what was happening. And it would be like people ask for something and then like 2 weeks later it's there, and then it's like it's really in that sort of thing. So I think like in terms of like when I'm saying we should talk more about what we're doing in Metacartel, I feel like if we have like what are Metacartel's goals, what do we want to accomplish, and like instead of just trying to build like in isolation from like the outside world, really just bringing the outside world into our world while we're building and letting them like see what we're doing, how we're doing it, and seeing that behind the scenes look into this stuff. So like, even if it's literally just us having like our internal meetings, like literally this, like if we live stream this, I think it would be great content, like our conversation right now, you know, because people see this is what's really happening behind the scenes. And often that's what people really care about, right? Yeah,
there's definitely an element of like vulnerability, which is good and attractive to people. And you're like, oh, like they're talking about what they're gonna do. Like it's not some thing that we don't, that's like some big master plan. It's like we're just kind of making it up as we go along. Like,
yeah.
Cool.
I think that's really cool, and it's one of the most like effective strategies for making it feel like a really community driven thing. Like if people can see their impact on the thing, because either they watched it happen and put in a comment before you actually did the actual live stream, or because they like basically being able to see their own impact on what you put out seems to be the most important thing to get people engaged. So streaming something like this, I think, is a really good idea. Showing people more what's going on in Metacartel, I think, is a really good idea. Like there's kind of like two angles that I think you can go with this. One is really like focusing on like, this is why Metacartel is amazing and what we're doing, and this is how you shape what we're doing. And another is kind of like, for lack of a better term, like ideological development of the Web3 movement, both showing people what people already believe, like what the values are, what got them here to begin with, and then developing those values, because we're not at the end. So if MetaMedia is a place where people come to debate those values and refine those values over time as things develop, like that's kind of like the Jacobin model for MetaMedia. And then there's still another model where it's more like a metacartel, like this is what we're doing and why you should be a part of it. And I think both of those are great. I do think eventually, like, got to pick one, because it helps people to understand what MetaMedia is if it's more specific. But I think those are both great options.
Yeah, so Niran, to recap that, so it's like either like conversations about what's happening within the metacartel, or like a broader discussion of the overall ideologies that underpin Web3, if I understood that correctly.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that if you pick the ideology track that you can't talk about what's happening in a metacartel. Like that's always good content regardless. It's just that the kind of when you try to explain to people what what MetaMedia is, it's like we're talking about the values behind Web3 and we're helping push them forward. Whereas if it's about metacartel, then it's like, hey, we're showing you what's going on in metacartel, showing you how you can join and why you should join, and what the people in metacartel are doing. Those are both great, but it just depends what we tell people we're doing.
It feels more like the first one is a why and the next one is a what, right? And I like the idea of coming from a why, and then you can like dip into what every now and then. But if you stay at the why level, people know that's like your value, your mission, and all the things stem from there, come back to that why. So
totally. And I like, when I was writing the newsletter this weekend, and I would love to hear your feedback on that as well. I was really like trying to bifurcate Metacartel's content versus MetaMedia's content. You know, so like for example, with Metacartel's newsletter, Shots Fired, that's Metacartel, right? Or Metagame. I actually am not sure of like the hierarchy of all the metas, but you know,
meta chaos.
Meta chaos. Yeah, so Shots Fired is really stuff about like what's going on with Metagame, I think, in just broader. No, it's not. Okay.
I think it's Metacartel. Shots Fired is the Metacartel newsletter. Yeah.
Exactly. So when I was, anyways, my point is when, like in thinking through MetaMedia and what I want, what we want to broadcast out, like going back to our initial discussion around the remit of MetaMedia, I think Hamad summed it up very succinctly when he said, you know, we have to broadcast and amplify what's going on in Web3 in a very raw, entertaining, and informative way. And to me, that's really like the crux of why this is important, because even for me, like going on Twitter and just like going through all the content that's out there nowadays, it's a lot of like very nitty gritty DeFi. And I mean, I love the stuff, but at the same time, it almost feels like watching like movement in a stock ticker. It's up and then it's down. And then I don't really know why, you know, it's just like, you just have like no context. You're like, okay, so now there's something called like you earned on finance. Okay. And what, you know, like I think the and what is missing a lot of the times when it comes to crypto conversations. And I want us to be there to fill that gap in the conversation.
Yeah.
Cool. In terms of actionable, like how this all like translate, this is like amazing feedback, by the way. Thank you all for sharing. So in terms of how that translates to this week's live stream, I think what might make sense. So first, from a technical standpoint, Hamad, we can figure out like I know that we did like a practice run a little bit half an hour before, but we can like message each other after this conversation to see what would make sense in terms of like an actual practice live stream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in terms of the format, I like starting out with something like spiciest tweet of the week. And then, you know, if everyone's on board with that today through MetaMedia's Twitter account and the Meta Cartel's Twitter account, we can solicit that sort of feedback from people in the thread. And then we can start like, maybe if we, I'll like ping you guys in the MetaMedia Telegram channel, but if we could like seed some of it with some tweets already. So, you know, it's like a snowball and like people see there's like conversation happening, that'd be great. And yeah, so spiciest tweet of the week would be great. I mean, Hamad, if you and I could like discuss it, I think that's like funny enough. But it would be even better if we could get like the person who actually tweeted to come on. But I don't want to like, you know, this is MVP stuff, so I don't want to make it too technically complicated. And then next, I feel like it might be funny for like Peter to come on for 15 minutes with like Peter's pet peeve, like what grinds my gears. That would just be like really hilarious.
Yeah.
And then, so those are two sort of like intro things. And then in terms of like the last section, I would love to dip into some topic around the ideology of Web3. It is a very broad area. Does anyone have any like particular topics that are top of mind for them and jump out that they would like to cover or potentially like to speak to?
Personally, I think it would be interesting to like highlight what's happening like in the physical space, like where kind of like progress is being made as far as like we've been talking. We had this group that's like kind of trying to set up a physical location in the US for like an ETH university, like studying DAOs and governance and this kind of stuff. And like obviously it's not happening anytime soon because we need like $10 million to buy a college campus, but the discussions are interesting and it's leading towards something that's like, oh, this could be interesting, right? Like how do we get more physical spaces? Because yeah, we're doing all this stuff in the blockchain, everything is done, you know, async, but like also we will go back to the real world sometimes too, right? So it's like it's interesting to see like what experiments are happening on the ground. People like normal people also are like, oh, that's something I could actually go and see or maybe be a part of. Whereas like these chat threads and Discord rooms are not always for everyone. One example I really like was from Bounty's Network. They went to Manila and they did like an ocean cleanup with people, like, and they paid them, and then like they had the bounties up, so it's like organizations could like delegate their funds to these people who were cleaning up the oceans, and they created this really cool like transparency for corporate giving, which was always like that's brilliant. Like, so Simona Pop, we should bring her in for like interview sometimes too, if you're doing that. She's great.
Yeah, no, I really.
But that physical element is like where is Ethereum or crypto rolling out in the real world right now, so that people can be like, oh, okay, that's really happening. Like I saw a Bitcoin ATM in where was I? Kansas City, Missouri, at a gas station. And I was like, what is this doing here? Like, and I was like, I asked the teller, I'm like, do people use this? She's like, all the time. She's like, one guy came in here for 4 weeks in a row and he put $100,000 in. I'm like, for what? She's like, he bought a house with Bitcoin. And I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like, that dude was a drug dealer for sure. She's like, he was just feeding hundreds into the machine. Like, and he was an old man. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? This is great. But I was like,
that guy's the plug.
For sure, exactly, right? Senior citizen hired by the cartel to buy Bitcoin. But yeah, so I thought it was pretty interesting. But things like that, right, where you're like crypto spotted in the wild.
Yeah, I actually really like that topic too. I was in Wyoming recently, and I also saw a Bitcoin ATM at the supermarket. And I was kind of joking about it with my roommates. I was like, it's like when you have an emergency need to buy Bitcoin right here and there. I don't know if like. I mean, I'm assuming they do like some sort of KYC, and I'm assuming the fees are probably higher than even like Coinbase, right? But yeah, I actually love that idea. Just like, where are some tangible touch points for Bitcoin and Ethereum in the real world? Because like my roommates listen to me talk about like crypto all the time, but I think to them it's still kind of like very abstract and not super tangible. It's like, okay, so theoretically, like this kind of makes sense in decentralized finance and so on, but in terms of like day to day, like it doesn't move the needle for them, right? In terms of their lives. So it's like, what's where do we see it going in the next, like, let's say 30 to 50 years? And what's the like small pieces of evidence that things are already starting to change? Hamad, would you be down for a topic like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be cool. And again, I think like, with stuff like this, it's good to have like sort of like this is like the theme of the topic or theme of the talk, and then
Sure.
if we like, let's say it's like called like physical communities, right? We can like ask out the audience like, what are examples that like see of like, ask them to share, and like if they bring something up, we go like, oh, let's see what this is, look it up, with them, and then talk about it like live, and I think like it's good to have like the theme to sort of like prime the conversation, but then lead into like engaging like the viewers with it too. But yeah, like I think a really cool, like I'm a big fan of dog fooding everything, so like in terms of actually like, if we're talking all this shit about Web3 and how it's all the rage and all this sort of stuff, and it's going to change everything, then we should be like acting in a way that we're using it for the things that we say we can use it for. So I think in terms of stuff like, like a huge thing in streaming, right, is like donations, where like you you send in, you like donate some certain amount of money to make a message show up or something on the stream. So we can do something like, we have like a MetaMedia token that you can redeem to like essentially like at any time you can redeem it, and then once you redeem it, it like pops up on the live screen feed, like something that like the hosts have to like stop the conversation and like address that something, or like do whatever it says on there or something like that, ways for them literally to like insert a coin to like change what's going on in the stream, and then rewarding people who source content for us, right? Like if we're going to have like crowdsourced content, we could have like a thing that we reward people for, like if you came up with the topics for the week or something, like you get an NFT, or you get tokens in the DAO, or like you get DAO shares, or like something like that, where you literally are like a part of it, right? You can become a part of it, and using, just, integrating Web3 stuff in it. And I was actually doing some research. It's actually not too hard. Block Native has like Notify.js, so we can literally just set up like a multi-sig and then have a QR code on the thing and tell people to like send a certain amount of ETH or something, and then like attach a message to it, and then we can like pop that message up on the screen or something. So yeah, I feel like the best way to like tell people is like show them, right? Rather than like just talking about it, we can actually like start to bring elements of it into the stream.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's the one part I always liked about like Loft Radio, is like watching the donations like pop up kind of as it goes along, the little chat window as well. Like it's almost entertaining, like.
And like even if you have literally donations like during the stream for like people who want to support like MetaMedia, and then a part of those donations go towards like as rewards to people who help source content, right? It just becomes like this flow of like, it creates an incentive for people to source better content or help with whatever, and then better content means people are more likely to donate or engage in that side.
No, I think that's great, and I'm going to look into like NFTs this week in terms of stuff like spiciest tweet of the week, to see how easy it would be to do that even for this week. So in the interest of time, although I would love to continue brainstorming. I could talk about this for 3 hours. I would love to get feedback in terms of the newsletter, which I sent out last Sunday. So what it covered essentially was some of the main projects that are driving up gas prices within Ethereum and causing congestion. And everyone knows that DeFi is like one of the like trends or themes that is leading more people to enter the space. And actually the main use case is Tether, and I think that's like probably tied to some DeFi use case. But the other like top 3 out of 5 projects that were driving up gas prices surprised me and not surprised me. Sadly, it was a lot of like Ponzi schemes and things like that. So anyways, my point being that similar to what happened in 2017 with the ICO mania, where there's like opportunity for profit, there's a lot of newcomers to this space. And when there's a lot of newcomers to the space who don't fully enter the space, there are bad actors who will try to take advantage of that. So yeah, it was like really fun to research it. But would love to hear your thoughts about like one, the article, and two, if there should be more of like a tie-in between like what we do across MetaMedia, like with the live stream and with the like weekly newsletter, and also eventually the quarterly like report.
I don't think there necessarily needs to be like a newsletter tied to the live stream. I don't think it necessarily has to. I guess it depends on what the newsletter is supposed to kind of do. Is it more of like a summary of all the things that MetaMedia did? So I could see that discussion of the gas prices being like someone who just like writes stuff about DeFi stuff, and then there's like the Meta Cartel posts. It doesn't have to be like every week or scheduled, but like you can kind of combine those things. I think it kind of goes with like do things kind of start splintering off if there is a bit of a people do start kind of following it and you get a little traction, splintering off into like other more regular focused things. And then I guess the same question then I guess is like how do you seed people getting interested? Maybe having like more people to like write stuff forward, like hey, this is so and so wrote this for this week, and then have a little bit of a just obviously the links to everything. You could have like the this week in Meta Cartel or whatever like you kind of had in there. I think that would be good. Start just getting people like interested in even if it's you wanting to write stuff and you writing a lot of it to start. If you but getting other starting to get people that are like oh like I like how this person put stuff together. I guess it kind of becomes similar to like a Defiant or like the Bankless thing.
I love both of those publications, by the way, and especially Bankless. I think it's just like super top notch and super happy to pay for what they've created. And I agree. I think like right now it's just once a week, but eventually I think it should be something like every day, and we can like ramp up to get there. But Yaler, Niran, Hamad, any feedback from the newsletter or like topics you would like to
I didn't read it to be honest.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
I think it was good. Like personally, I feel like just reading it, thinking about like what kind of audience you want to go for. Like it seemed like a lot of it was like discussion around gas prices and synthetics fees and stuff like that, which I think it's good content, but I don't know if that's like the type of people that would care about that stuff is like might be different than what we're trying to go for.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, in terms of just like getting away from like too many technicals. But yeah, like again, I think like it's not we haven't really defined exactly what this newsletter is or what it's for, so I think it's fine to just kind of experiment with it. But in general, I do think like something like gas prices being high is like a lot of people like anyone in ETH is aware of it and like knows there's a problem, and anyone who's not probably doesn't care about it.
Yeah, that's the point.
Just like brutally honest feedback.
No, that's totally welcome. You were right though. I think that I don't have like an answer necessarily specifically for you in terms of who the target audience is, and I have a suspicion that will sort of like unfold in terms of the next weeks or months as we see like who is engaging with the content and who's like subscribing and so on and so forth. Yeah. But just to stick to that overall mission of like broadcasting Web3 and not being like too in the weeds and trying to think about what the signal is rather than noise. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I didn't read it before either. I did skim it a little bit. Like I saw the topic and I was like, it was a thing where I was like, oh, I know the gas prices are high, so I didn't really dive into it. When I skimmed through it, it felt like it was well written. So like that's definitely like there's some stuff people put out there that does not feel polished. This felt polished. I think one idea for for content for the newsletter could be kind of like workshopping live stream topics for future weeks. So if you imagine that the focus of the live stream is like this sort of ideological development idea for, I don't know what the right term to use for this sort of thing, but if we're talking about like what people believe, coming up with different things in the Web3 belief system, trying to flesh them out into like what people believe, and then giving examples, potentially examples that you actually solicit from Metacartel or other places. It's just saying, hey, what do you believe about this part of the Web3 values? Like, what's going on out there? And just weekly putting that out there, and then diving in more deeply on the live stream is just one sort of option. But in general, I think the main value of the newsletter in the near term is getting people's email addresses so you can keep moving them to consume your content.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's great. So maybe something we could do differently for this week's newsletter is like send out a poll to the Metacartel group around, and I have to like think about what question I would position it around, but something about like the ideology of Web3, like, oh, what do you think, like, do you think that Peter like tweeted something about like climate change and DAO? So it's like, oh, do you think that, as like a member of like a decentralized movement, like, do we have like a moral obligation to like help out, help the environment, or help like, underserved communities abroad? And you know what I mean? Like, what's our calling, right? Like, we have this like amazing technology, and we have a lot of super, super smart people as part of the community, but like, how do we leverage that to actually improve the world in some way, which has like not happened at all with tech innovation in the past. It's actually really fascinating. Like, we've always had this assumption that more tech would lead to more open and democratic society, but as we can see in places like China, it's actually used to surveil citizens and to actually inflict genocide, actually, when it comes to Uyghur ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. But yeah, it's fascinating, right? Like, just because you're more technologically advanced doesn't mean you're more like morally advanced. Yeah, Yaylor?
Yeah, so I guess I just wanted to get clear on that last point. I really like the direction of what you're saying. Is the intention to like rally people around a shared like point of view and then like push them into action, or is it just to expose some like shared beliefs?
Ideally, I would love to have like a call to action, just because a lot of crypto content out there, I read stuff that's happening. It's like, oh, we're helping like farmers in South America or whatever. And I'm like, oh, is that just like a PR thing? Or is that something that's actually happening? Because a lot of the time, I feel like these nonprofit use cases are really only PR for like corporations and things like that.
Yeah. It's interesting because like, for me, like the thing that like really drew me into Metacartel, and I think is sort of like in the DNA of Metacartel, is this idea that if we don't do something useful with all this stuff, then like everything we're doing is pointless. And actually, like, it started with dApps, right? Like, it doesn't matter how scalable we can make Ethereum if like it's not easy to build dApps, or there's no good dApps out there. How do we actually make use of this stuff? So I think just that general idea of like, the practical application of this stuff is a good theme for us to sort of hold on to and focus on, and try to like show people that we are taking action and what actions we are taking, and then inspire them to take action. Answer their questions on how, like, if they want to take action, like where they can go, what they can do. And yeah, just essentially that idea of just like, focusing on like building and doing useful things rather than, focusing on PR and focusing on, like, how are we going to position this so we can like pump our token as high as possible and this and that, right? So just really, that authentic, like, we want people to see that we care, and then we want them to care as well, and to sort of create this sort of culture in this. Because right now, really, the culture in crypto is just, with all the DeFi stuff, it's really just focused on like, how can I like maximize my self gain, like how can I make as much money as possible by like earning yield on these things. And it's cool and all, but really it's like, it's just kind of like a new like packaging of like the same old things we've had always in this world, right? So I think focusing on what's beyond that, with the why, like why are we really here, like it's what's the point of it all, and guiding people to like take action, and also just learning from people how we can take action, right? Like learn what they really need, learn what's really important for communities. And Peter is a community builder. That's what he's done a really good job of, right? Like he told me, like when he was first initially like setting up Metacartel and getting things going, it was all just about like having one-on-one conversations with people, right? And I think if we can just scale that culture up a bit, where instead of Peter just having one-on-one calls with individuals, we're actually having, a more broader calls with the audience and talking about this stuff. Like, let's do something about all this, instead of just commenting on it, or like, just going beyond that like, oh, this tech is cool and this is what you can do with it, right? Like,
well, and we also have to like keep in mind too that like depending on what the audience is, like if we get too far down a rabbit hole, like we're losing people, right?
Yeah.
Like entertainment is one thing, and like we can do that, but then like informative like interviews that dive deep into projects might not be like the angle for us to like steer it back, pull it back in like a nice way.
Yeah.
So it's like it's still accessible for people, right?
And it's going to be really hard, right? Because none of us are used to it, right? Like there's a reason why everyone talks about the stuff that they do and the way that we like do it, right? It's like that's what comes easy, that's what comes intuitive. So it's really going to take a lot of like moving beyond our comfort zone and like intentional like having like that self-awareness of like what really are we putting out there, how can we make it better, and getting feedback from the community. I don't think it'll come easy, but it'll be worth the journey.
I think that's sorry, go ahead.
So I think one of the hardest problems we're going to face when coming to like a call to action for like, oh, if you want to contribute to whatever this is how you do it, is that like using this technology, there isn't that much you can do to solve most of the problems people care about right now, because we just haven't built that much useful stuff other than DeFi, which doesn't really solve people's direct problems. But the one kind of universal answer to how to contribute to solving problems that you care about is to organize. And that's kind of what we do. And that's kind of like with DAOs, what you can do. So like, I don't like, a lot of people joke about how over the past couple of years in the Ethereum community, everyone's like, oh, we should create a DAO for that. And we should create a DAO for that. But one thing we could do is kind of lean into that. And if we are talking about real world problems with people and people are wondering about how we can use this technology to solve them, you can actually say, hey, let's build an organization within the people who are interested in blockchains and know how to use private keys and all that, form it as a DAO and go from there, because the tools might not be ready there to actually make a big difference using this technology. But when it is ready, it's going to need organized people who are ready to take advantage of it. So just trying to take the approach of organizing people who are interested about every particular problem that we end up covering.
I think that's a fantastic point. And I know we're at time, but just I guess one last anecdote around this topic of like doing good with the technology we have. I was at a conference earlier this year, and we were talking about like blockchain for social impact. And I was like, oh, I have this idea, and something that I feel very passionately about is like the situation I mentioned before with like the persecution of ethnic minorities in China, and how no one in the world really cares because like people relate to people that like look like them or stuff people they know about, which is why when an atrocity happens in Paris, France, we're like, oh, I've been to Paris. That's terrible. Notre Dame. But when there's something that happens with like a Muslim ethnic minority in China, like people like they just can't really visualize it in their head. Anyway, so I was talking to her about this. I was like, this is a really important issue to me. And her response, and I wish I was making this up, she was like, oh, that's not really on trend for right now. Like right now, people really care about climate change. So maybe like we can talk about it in the future when it's more like on brand. I was like, human rights is not like a popularity thing. But I feel like a lot of these organizations with the sort of resources and money to back these blockchain for social impact causes, I really don't think it's because they necessarily care, but because it's something that makes them look good. Something that I hope we can change for all of this. So I know we're at time. I wanted to run through some I just want to recap next steps. So next steps, in terms of like this week's live stream, I will send out like a poll from the MetaMedia Twitter account around like what's like the not poll, but like what's the spiciest tweet of the week. I'll add like some examples. I'll retweet it from the Metacartel account, so we'll get some like feedback there. So that will be how we open up our show on Friday. I'll ask Peter if he wants to come on for Peter's pet peeves. I think it would actually be really funny if we made that a weekly thing. It's like a 15-minute commitment or something, but it's up to him. And then if you guys have ideas like around like I would like to like maybe talk to someone from well actually in terms of the content of the show, yeah, we want to talk about like physical communities. But if there's any like anyone we should interview, we think it should be like Simona Pop or whoever. We can continue the conversation on the Telegram chat. And then for the newsletter, I'll like have a think about what sort of like more like meatier, thornier, like ideological Web3 topics we could talk about. But I'll like ask you guys about it too in the Meta Cartel chat to get broader feedback. Anything? Yeah. Any other questions or comments or feedback that you guys want to get in before the call ends?
Yeah, just like one random idea I had written down was like doing like a Web3 tier list. So just like, I think that'd be like a really spicy thing to do is like either like ranking projects in like from like S tier to like D tier and just like kind of like roasting them or giving like constructive feedback, I guess.
It'd be really funny.
I think it'll like, it would be good to like get a lot of attention because like people will get there like, a lot of people probably get offended and like in some way, but like as long as we're backing everything up with like facts and like our reasonings, right? It's just, I think it's fair, but I think it would be a good spicy thing to do. And in general, I feel like it would be nice to have some sort of like central place where we can have a running list of like ideas of stuff to talk about. Like we've had we've had like random stuff, like either brought some stuff up and we've had like ideas in the past, but just like, so we can, when we're actually in the stream and like we're looking for stuff, like we can go back and like reprime our minds with like ideas we've had and allow other people to submit ideas too.
Do you think a Google Doc would be a good format for that or?
Yeah, we could have a Google Doc, maybe even like set up like a Google form or something where like people can just like submit ideas and just goes into like a Google spreadsheet.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else from anyone on the call?
Great work, Les and Hamad. This has been amazing.
Awesome.
Golden.
Yeah,
Also, I was actually recording this. So if you guys are okay with it, I can actually publish it to YouTube under MetaMedia.
I'm super.
I think it's a good idea.
Awesome.
Hilarious.
I am anonymous. All right, sweet. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Take care. See you tomorrow.
See y'all.
All right.